The entire assessment was about 3 pages long, but it was the judgment in the first paragraph that mattered most. It is unlikely that the group will attempt an attack during the event. For the last 3 months, Daniel's team had been monitoring a small extremist group that had become increasingly hostile online. The group had made threats, discussed potential targets, and several of the members had even travelled interstate to meet with fellow extremists. But there was zero evidence that they had acquired weapons, no confirmed reconnaissance against the event's venue, and no indication that final attack planning had begun. An attack was possible, but Daniel didn't assess that it was probable. And he felt confident that the group he was tracking was the only threat to the event. So, an attack on the event was unlikely. The assessment went to Rebecca, the senior officer tasked with coordinating security for several major events being held across the city that weekend. And she had a problem. There simply weren't enough specialist resources to cover everything. One event faced a likely threat from a group with a recent history of violence, while another had attracted threats against a visiting foreign dignitary. But luckily for her, Daniel had assessed that the event he was looking into was unlikely to be attacked. So Rebecca moved some additional officers elsewhere. 3 days later, Daniel learned that a security officer had identified a vehicle linked to one of the group's members parked near the event's venue. The driver remained there for around 11 minutes and then left, and the security officer passed on the information to their local police liaison. The venue was in a very busy part of the city, and thousands of vehicles passed through that area every single day. And there was nothing to suggest that the driver had actually been conducting any level of reconnaissance. It could have been completely innocent, but it still bothered Daniel, so he adjusted his assessment. An attack remains unlikely, although recent activity has increased our concern. That update reached Rebecca, and she read it between two of the countless meetings she had penciled in for that day. Remains unlikely. Okay, cool. No need for any change to any of the deployment planning. Then 2 days later, something else happened. A member of the group attempted to purchase protective equipment and several large fuel containers. Again, there were innocent explanations. But combined with the vehicle sighting and previous reporting, Daniel was becoming increasingly uncomfortable. So he went back through everything: the threats, the travel, the associations, the vehicle, the purchases. His judgment had changed substantially since his first assessment, but it hadn't changed enough to cross into the next probability category. We continue to assess an attack as unlikely. Rebecca read the update, and for the third time that week, she saw the same judgment: unlikely. And the deployment plan remained unchanged. Fortunately, the weekend passed and nothing happened. The event finished without incident and thousands of people went home safely. And by Monday morning, everyone had moved on to something else. But then a few weeks later, police arrested 3 members of the group over unrelated offences. Search warrants were executed at several properties, and inside one house, investigators found photographs of the event venue. They also found maps, notes describing access points, protective equipment, fuel containers, and discussions about possible attack methods. None of that proved an attack would have occurred. Maybe they would have abandoned the idea, maybe they weren't capable of carrying it out, and maybe Daniel's assessment had been perfectly reasonable based on what he had known at the time. The discovery triggered a review, and during that review, Rebecca asked Daniel a question. When you wrote the first assessment, how unlikely did you think an attack actually was? Maybe 12%. 12? Roughly. I thought you meant, I don't know, 5%, maybe less? Daniel didn't say anything. And the second assessment? Probably 25. And the last one? Getting close to 40. So your judgment went from around 12% to nearly 40. Yeah. And yet I saw the same word 3 times. Neither of them had broken policy. Daniel had used the organization's approved probability language, and Rebecca had read every single assessment. But neither of them had understood the word likely in the same way. From Daniel's perspective, the threat had changed considerably. But from Rebecca's perspective, it had remained unlikely. We deal with uncertainty every day, and we use words to communicate it. Unlikely, likely, highly likely, almost certain. Many intelligence teams and agencies try to make those words more precise by assigning them defined probability ranges. But defining a word doesn't guarantee that two different people will understand that word the same way. Research into probability assessments has repeatedly shown that substantial variation exists in how people interpret linguistic probability terms. Standardized lexicons can help reduce that variation, but they hardly ever eliminate it. And, as we've just seen, probability categories can also hide movement. Daniel's judgment changed, but the word didn't. Numbers aren't a perfect solution either. Saying there's a 37% chance of something happening doesn't magically mean our intelligence is accurate to within 1 percentage point. And numbers, according to repeated research, can help create false precision. But this story isn't really an argument about whether analysts should use words or numbers. Daniel hadn't made a 5% assessment, and Rebecca hadn't been told the threat was 5%. Yet somehow, 5% was the judgment influencing her decisions. Intelligence isn't successfully communicated when we understand what we wrote. It's successfully communicated when the person making the decision fully understands the judgment we were trying to convey. So every now and then, particularly with customers you work with regularly, it might be worth asking, when I say unlikely, what do you think I mean?